Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Carledge, and I'm passionate about helping you master your animal training skills using the most positive and least intrusive approaches. Here at ATA, we understand that navigating the vast challenges you encounter in training requires a comprehensive base of knowledge and experience. It's common to face obstacles and rough patches on your journey that can leave you feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Therefore, since 2015, we've been on a mission to empower animal training geeks worldwide. We've aided thousands in developing their skills, expanding their knowledge, boosting their confidence, and maximizing their positive impact on all the animal and human learners they work with. We are excited to do the same for you. Simply visit www.atamember.com, join our vibrant community, and geek out with us. And of course, in the meantime, enjoy this free podcast episode as we explore new ways to help you supercharge your training skills, grow your knowledge, and build your confidence, so that you can craft a life that positively impacts every learner you encounter. Well, we will start today's episode where I'm super excited to welcome back to the show for part 2 of our conversation, Sarah Fisher. Now, before we dive in, if you haven't listened to the first part of our conversation, you can find it in the previous episode on whatever app you're listening to this show on. In that episode, we explored Sarah's journey and getting started from a young age and getting her first dog to what led all the way up to where she currently invests and has been for the last 24 years, her resources and her time, Tilly Farm and ACE, aka Animal Care and Education. It's definitely worth a listen. However, if you haven't listened to it yet, you are, of course, welcome to start here with part 2. You're still going to gain plenty of insights to help you grow your skills, knowledge, and confidence in animal training. Let's get straight into it. It's my very great pleasure to welcome Sarah back to the show today. Sarah, thank you for taking the time to come and hang out with us again at Animal Training Academy.
Thank you for inviting me back, Ryan. It's a pleasure.
Well, I can't wait to do this episode. I've been very excited about it because for the listeners, and Sarah, as you know, last year, I was fortunate enough to be in the UK for family reasons, and I managed to convince my wife to let me slip away from family responsibilities to attend the Pet Professional Guild British Isles Summit at Craig Ogilvy's training facility. Now, I'll be honest, Sarah, while I was aware of your name, I hadn't had the privilege of diving into your work before that. And then at the summit, when I saw your ACE free work session on the schedule, I thought, I have no idea what this is, but I'm going to attend it. And I have to say, it was one of the most fascinating live sessions I've seen. You had the dogs moving around, various items, some items loaded to ground, some higher up, snuffle mats, food here and there. And the dog guardians weren't actively engaging with the dogs. You were simply observing and pointing out behaviors and things you say, like, look at how the dog did this or how the dog is doing that. And it blew my mind how much you could interpret from their choices, movements, and actions. Then, if I remember correctly, it was really cold outside, and you and Leslie ended up teaming up for a session inside instead of one of you being outside. Leslie McDevitt, that is. Leslie's work is something I've studied for a while, and seeing both of you together, blending your insights, was incredibly insightful and inspiring. So for those listening who, like me at that time, might not be familiar with what you do, can you please dive into what free work is? What was it that you were doing in that session, and why it is so important? And maybe we can expand from there into how free work fits into your broader scope of your ACE program.
Sure. It was such a pleasure to connect with Leslie and to meet you at that conference. It was such a great event for me. I love doing live stuff. Kind of missed that. So much moved online, obviously, because of the pandemic, but it's great to be reconnecting with people in person again. So free work is actually quite difficult to describe what it is, but basically kind of think enrichment but with really good observations that help us ensure that those sensory experiences are enriching on a physical level as well. And as part of my influence from the human field, I was highly aware of the power of influencing the tactile system for dogs that were worried about hand contact, find it hard to navigate their environment. And going back a few years, when we first had Tilly Farm, I was doing a lot of teaching, particularly at animal shelters like Battersea. Battersea is one of our oldest and most famous shelters here in the world. Here in the UK. And I was teaching a 2-day workshop. And one of the last dogs that came in for an assessment, because I, by then, was being able to look at coat patterns and say, hang on a minute, this dog needs a veterinary evaluation because the coat will change direction where there's a loss of mobility through the skin, and that might be because of diseases like arthritis or micro traumas, little muscle tears. It can also be to do with, other health conditions and issues with the hormone system, all of that. So people were asking me to come and teach those observations to staff members and to training clubs, and I was getting to share through PowerPoints and stuff and seminars and alongside some amazing people in the world of behavior. So again, very enriched learning experience for me. So I was at Battersea. This final dog came in on day one of this workshop, and he was pulling into his flat collar and his eyes were bulging. Pulling into a flat collar can increase the pressure behind the eye. And I said, I really wanted to transition him to a harness if that was appropriate. And the caregiver who had been looking after him only for a few days said, yeah, I didn't think that was going to be a problem. And he went to put a harness on this dog, Oscar, and Oscar erupted. And I felt awful. I had the lead and I had quickly threaded a second lead through the collar and threw that thing to an assistant. And this person had to back away and did all the right things, disengaging and lowering posture and looking away. But Oscar was fixated on this caregiver. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is absolutely horrific, because there's a high chance that this dog isn't going to make it through the assessment process, because Bassi never refused a dog. And they were always realistic and honest about their euthanasia policy. And I said to the head of behaviour, look, I feel that we've blown this. We missed the fact that this dog was potentially so stressed. And I would really like to give him a really nice day tomorrow. And I also understand why, he's in for assessment. He'd been picked up as a stray. He's probably not going to be successfully rehomed, 18-month-old big brindle bull breed in London. And the head of behaviour said, yeah, of course, he can do part 2 of the workshop tomorrow. I just wanted to give him a bit of peace. And I was thinking, okay, so it was proximity of people, but he was okay with us holding the lead. Was it something novel going to touch his body? How can we influence the tactile system? And overnight, I was thinking, we've got to do something. We've got to do something to give this dog a good experience, to help him feel safe and hopefully start to relax a bit in what's obviously a very stressful environment for him. So next morning, I got anything we could. We're talking, 2000, 2001, dog food bags, that were going out to the bin, the mats from car footwells, blankets, any different texture that we could find. Because I knew from my human learning that actually putting different textures on the soles of people's feet really had quite a profound impact on the brain, particularly where people had disease states that were impairing cognition and impairing movement. And I knew it's a very powerful part of therapy for some people. And I was thinking, why aren't we doing this with dogs? Why aren't we doing this with dogs? So Oscar was the one that just started that whole thing off. We got pallets, covered them so he didn't get his feet caught between the slats, got anything that would just give him a different sensory experience and give him something to feel and think about instead of the stress of being handled by unfamiliar people in this overwhelming environment. And I put 2 leads on him, threaded one through the collar, and asked the caregiver from the day before whether he wanted to reconnect with his dog. And he did, because he felt terrible as well. And I said, we're just going to let him move. We'd had all this stuff laid out in this concrete paddock. It was before this amazing refurb happened at the London site in Battersea. And we just let this dog move, and we just moved with him. We weren't trying to steer him. We weren't trying to lure him. We were just moving. We had him on a lead for everybody's safety. And as he started to touch different things and step onto and off their pallet, his whole posture started to change. He got his head down. He was sniffing. He really started to become more focused in his movement. And he suddenly looked at the caregiver and he started wagging his tail. Well, we all wanted to burst into tears because clearly the dog had been so stressed yesterday that we'd completely blown it, didn't realize how stressed he'd been coming in, maybe. We knew he was stressed. Completely blew it and added more pressure when we were trying to take pressure off him by putting him in a harness, getting the pressure off his neck, that he hadn't even recognized who that caregiver was in that moment. So he was wagging his tail and, oh my gosh, he was amazing. And everything was different in that session. It was peaceful. It was incredible. And a month or so later, I was teaching another workshop there, and I said to the head of behavior, I said, dare I ask what happened to Oscar? I get that he was not going to necessarily be an easy dog to rehome, particularly as he wasn't able to cope in kennels. And she said, oh, just stick your head out my office and look down that pathway down there. And there was Oscar and his caregiver, and they were both sitting leaning against the wall. And the guy had his arm over Oscar's back and he was stroking him on the chest. And they were just watching dogs coming down from the kennels to the paddocks, dogs going from the paddocks back up to the kennels. And he got successfully rehomed. And that dog is one of those dogs who absolutely was one of the foundations for what is ACE, because that started to take me on this whole sensory experience. And then I had a foster in 2008 called Cookie Dough. I would foster some of the puppies that were struggling at Battersea. And she was really overwhelmed by anything that touched her, any noises, visual information. And people were saying, train more. And I was doing a lot of positive teaching, obviously teaching her lots of life skills that was much more beneficial to me than having her grab my hair and skin on my neck. She could really jump, and my clothing when she was overwhelmed. But I fell into the trap of teaching her lots of alternative behaviors, and she was super smart, super clever. But I then thankfully realized that actually, although I was teaching her some useful skills, I wasn't helping her relax. I was actually keeping her busy and engaged, but just diverting that engagement away from my body. And that's when people going, train more, train more. And I was like, no, if something isn't helping, there's benefits here, but it's not helping her self-regulate and connect and relax in the environment. There's something missing. So you don't do more of the same thing. You have to start doing something different. And I looked online, excuse me, for sensory sensitivity, information going to the human field. Sometimes we have to look outside our own industry. And I came across the work of Jean Ayres, who's an American psychologist, an occupational therapist, who developed the theory of sensory integration and looking at that relationship between the brain and behavior and recognizing sensory integrative dysfunction. And I thought, my gosh, this is it. Any sensory stimuli that is overwhelming is what is driving all the behaviors where Cookie Dough's having to use her teeth. And that's something we need to consider in the industry, is the sensory side of biting, because we don't. And we know that children do it when they're overwhelmed. We know that adults who maybe have dementia or who are overwhelmed bite. And yet with dogs, it's not a conversation that I often hear. So that's one of my passions, discussing the sensory side of the bite. That led me to integrate even more sensory experiences than the different textures that I'd introduced to Oscar a few years before. And we had a sensory barn at Tilly Farm for visiting dogs. So I recognized dogs found it really difficult in novel environments to settle, but the minute we gave them space to move and use their nose, they were able to feel much more relaxed more quickly. And that, of course, helped their caregivers relax. So when dogs were coming for one-to-one experiences, I was creating more sensory experiences. This was pre-snuffle mat, so we'd have rolled up or bunched up towels in raised boxes. And people would say, oh, my dog's not interested in exploring any puzzle games or anything. But the minute I'd lift stuff off the floor, dogs could suddenly access items that had food sprinkled on them. And I was also using big mats long before licky mats were made that were textured mats to stop food bowls sliding on kitchen floors. I was putting pastes and stuff like that on those to give the dog a different sensory experience with their tongue. Because that was also something I'd noticed with Cookie Dough, that she didn't lick anything. She didn't use her tongue. It was all teeth, 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 teeth in response to sensory overload, which probably included excessive fatigue and potential gut pain as well. And so these outcomes were amazing. The minute dogs could access items physically and emotionally, because a dog that's not feeling safe isn't going to put their head down either, suddenly we were getting completely different outcomes during the one-to-ones. And people were sharing more quickly why they'd come to see me, instead of just dropping a sort of behavior bomb towards the end of the session. Lots of people that do one-to-one client sessions will have gone through lots of tips and techniques, and then just as the session's coming to the end, the caregiver might go, oh, and I also need to ask you about something quite serious, significant. And that's quite a common theme, that people will share the bigger stuff towards the end as they know that there's going to be a get out. And what was happening was that people were sharing more and more quickly because their dogs were relaxed. Dogs were relaxing that had really struggled in novel environments. The outcomes were amazing. And I started to bring all these sensory experiences together as a separate learning experience for dogs like Cookie Dough. We'd have sensory stations going on group workshops that I was teaching, again, with amazing outcomes with the caregivers and the dogs, just sharing these explorations in a really peaceful way. And then Henry arrived in 2017 and brought everything together, because he actually started to offer learning behaviors. And the way he navigated the world was very similar to Cookie Dough, who ended up staying with me. And I credit Cookie Dough and Henry for being the two dogs who really are the founders of ACE, because without them adding even more amazing nuanced layers to the way I was already exploring connecting with dogs, ACE Free Work wouldn't exist. So now we have a range of different, what we call stations, where we might have a step that we then have a secure snuffle mat on, or an IKEA play mat. They're great, where we'll put 3 snuffle mats, because Cookie Dough, I gave her one single snuffle mat, would just pick it up, flick it with a terrier, brilliant death shake, and all the treats would be scattered on the floor. It'd take me longer to load one than it would take her to dispatch them. And I realized that I wasn't meeting her DNA needs, that it was actually not a very enriching experience for her. It was a bit boring, a bit frustrating maybe. And I watched her in the sensory barn where the donkeys would spend the night, and I'd watch her scenting through the straw banks on the trail of rats. And she would have been a serial killer had I let her, but we have an amazing array of wildlife at the farm, and I want everyone to live peacefully together. So she would never get over and aroused around, the rat scent. Excuse me, sorry. But she really enjoyed pushing her head through the straw banks. And I realized that the snuffle mat wasn't facilitating that. So I got someone to make lots of thin snuffle mats. One of our ACE Advanced tutors, Sue Williamson, who's an amazing groomer. Well worth exploring how she incorporates ACE into the grooming salon to give dogs a break. She's amazing. So she made me loads of thin snuffle mats, put them in a big pile, and Cookie Dough loved pushing her head through each layer to get the treats. So we're really looking at what information are we learning from the dog to create an enriching experience and increasing their sensory reference library, if you like. So initially we put in the ball pit that Cookie inspired in 2008. But actually I discovered that lots of dogs were worried by that noise. We don't use cardboard boxes packed with stuff, because watching videos of people who've set these kind of games out for their dogs, a lot of dogs are actually worried by the noise and the fact that the box moves. So you see this body tension. And that's why I really encourage people to observe look at what you're actually seeing rather than focus on what you believe is happening. Because sometimes in our bid to enrich our dogs' lives, we inadvertently create more frustration or body tension. And nobody means to do that, of course. So free work is this amazing sensory adventure where we're building at a pace to suit each individual dog. For some dogs, we might just start with 3 stations. For others, we might start with 5 or 6, and then we build and we add in textures underfoot. Going back to what Oscar taught me in 2000, 2001. Then we do low level platforms and low level up and over boards, and can really start identifying physical challenges. And there's something absolutely extraordinary about that free work experience where it really does help to integrate every single part of the dog's amazing body. And habits change, behavioral habits, movement habits, postural habits, habits in the caregiver changes in this incredible way that really helps dogs connect with self, connect with their environment, and connect with us in a really peaceful and rewarding way.
So it's about getting the dogs relaxed, the
Yeah.
owners relaxed, and observing, picking up things to give us information about the learner in front of us.
It's giving the dogs a chance to be the pilot of their own learning experiences. And we're there as kind of air traffic controllers to guide them back to a safer flight path should the need arise. So we'll have, for example, a dog came a few years ago and was introduced as a 9-year-old dog who had a high prey drive around birds and would chase and hunt birds, and would also bark and lunge and spin when on the lead if he saw another dog. So he's 9 years old, so he's got well practiced behavioral responses to very specific stimuli, birds and unfamiliar dogs. In his free work session, I filmed it for the caregiver. And we have like amazing layouts, but we can also have really simple layouts. And we can have mini versions and combination stations where we put a lot of stuff together in one space. So you don't need a big space to be able to do this. But we were in my indoor arena and it's open on 2 sides. And this dog was off lead and enjoying this beautiful exploration with his caregiver. And one of our local corvids flew down and was first sitting on the low wall because the corvids know free work means food. And then the corvid flew down and landed on the surface of the arena and was just hopping around on the outskirts of the free work setup. And the dog 100% knew that bird was there and was so engaged and so focused and so peaceful and enjoying that connection with his caregiver that he almost, if a dog could have shrugged his shoulders, like whatever, he'd have done that. And the caregiver was so amazed. She said, I cannot believe what I'm seeing. This is absolutely extraordinary. And we see this over and over again with free work. It is mind blowing. She then, when she went outside, wanted to see what his response would be to the next dog that was going to come out of their car and come into the free work space. So she waited, and her dog would have previously lunged and spun and barked on the lead, and he just stood on a relaxed lead, just watching this other dog go by. And we see this over and over again. There's something, I've got lots of theories. I understand a little bit about the nervous system. I have a huge passion for it. I obviously have information I've got from human experiences and learning, and I'm always reading. And all roads kind of keep coming back to free work. But that kind of quiet engagement and navigating easy obstacles, it's not a challenge. Obstacles is almost the wrong word. Easy items that are changing the body posture can enhance learning in humans. And that's 100% what we see with dogs. And it's just a really extraordinary way of helping dogs that would normally be scanning the environment and really worried about unfamiliar people or worried about the horses or needing to carry a toy in their mouth all the time. Just take that breath and really connect with self. And we're influencing, so many sensory systems through that kind of peaceful engagement. It's almost a bit like kind of sensory yoga. And we just help dogs sort of engage the parasympathetic nervous system. We can also highlight habits in the caregiver as well as the dog, and see where that dog may be in need of additional support, first through vet checks and then maybe through a nutritionist and, a veterinary physio or whatever, massage therapist or whatever's going to be of benefit to the dog. And it's amazing for dogs of all ages, from all backgrounds. If dogs have had a deprived start, we can start to fill in some of the gaps. Dogs that might have been born in a suboptimal environment. And for dogs like Cookie Dough, who just found the world utterly overwhelming, that whole process really helped to give her agency over those sensory experiences and integrate those experiences in a way that made life way more peaceful and rewarding for her. And we've also identified some amazing details in the way dogs gather information that I don't know how we've missed it in other contexts. And so we have people watching the free work sessions. We only have a few people. We only take 5 dogs on each workshop and up to 10 spectators. But nearly every single dog that I've watched, when we give them the opportunity to explore through hopefully rewarding engagements with our ACE free work, nearly every single dog, and I've watched thousands now, when they want to gather data from an unfamiliar person, they come into that space, they glance towards maybe 2 or 3 people watching, then they go and explore a tub truck filled with mini snuffle mats at a height that's easy for them to access. Then they start air scenting towards those 1 or 2 people and maybe glancing towards another couple of people in the room and then moving and exploring something else in free work. Then they start this casual walk by of the 1 or 2 people they've air scented towards, and then they go back to free work. They never walk by everyone. They never air scent towards all the spectators. And then once they've done a walk by, they'll come and shoe scent or scent the lower leg of the people they've walked by, and then maybe go and walk by 2 people on the opposite side of the room and go back to free work. This amazing sequence. And then once they've done lower leg scenting, then they'll come and scent from the hip up and then orientate themselves and air scent the breath. And people have got a unique breath, just like a fingerprint. It's a unique signature. And obviously it's not appropriate for dogs to come up and sniff everyone's breath, but I actually wonder if that's why a lot of dogs get anxious and jump up to try and get that sensory information really quickly. And I also think, how often have we interrupted this beautiful, nuanced data gathering process by encouraging puppies to jump up at us, leaning over, touching them, when all they wanted to do was sniff a shoe? If a dog's physically uncomfortable, if they've got arthritis or emotionally uncomfortable, they might not start with that shoe and lower leg scent. They might start with that hip and upper body scenting. But from the thousands of dogs I've observed, only 2 dogs have run over to people straight away, even though their caregivers will always say, oh, my dog's going to come and mug you. My dog always jumps up. My dog loves people. And when I hear people say, my dog loves people, he's going to jump all over you, my immediate thought is, has this dog got body tension? This dog is under social pressure, and that's often to do with body sensitivity. And that's what I was starting to match with all the observations that I was bringing from my human background to the dog and the horse world, seeing these very clear patterns in the way people were describing their animals and behavior that they were witnessing, pairing that with what I was actually seeing in terms of the way the dogs would organize their body. And it's the same for humans. We have the same patterns of holding. If our trapezius muscles very expressive, there's an emotional connection to what we do with our shoulders, and it's the same for the dogs. So watching these dogs do these amazing data gathering explorations is mind-blowing. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it's not only in free work that dogs will do this. Give them the chance, they'll do it when you're out and about as well. And the other thing that's mind-blowing to me is the finish clues, when the dogs nearly always explore for around 17 minutes. If they're free work aficionados, they might go on for 20. But most dogs will explore for around 17 minutes. And this was a really strong pattern when we started to time these explorations. And then I started to look at the neuroscience behind that. And TED Talks at 18 minutes for a reason, because that's a good time budget for absorbing information and then having a break to process all of that. And there was a study done with people who were in some stages of cognitive decline, where if they had 17 minutes sitting mindfully, paying attention to what they could feel in terms of their clothing on their skin and paying attention to their heart rate and their breath, it had a profound and positive impact on cognition. And the researchers didn't know why it was happening, but they knew it was happening. And what they also discovered was that those people only had to have that experience once. And I'm reading that and I'm freaking out, because this is exactly what we're seeing in free work. Profound changes in movement and behavior. Do we then go, hey, we've resolved everything? Of course not, because practice makes perfect. We want to keep giving that dog that experience of peace. And for many caregivers, they've never seen their dog relaxed before. And for many dogs, they've never felt relaxed before. So that's also been a hugely profound experience, because the caregivers can recognize what their dog can experience in terms of relaxation and connection to self, and therefore identify more quickly when something is starting to change. And in ACE, we really focus on that dog's internal environment. And the more we focus on well-being in the internal environment for a dog, and that might include dietary change, absolutely addressing pain. So many dogs are living with chronic pain, and it's overlooked because people don't recognize what a painful landscape looks like for a dog. And that's one of my passions, pointing out these coat changes, the spread of the toe that tells me there's uneven weight bearing through a particular foot. And that's why the toes have had to splay on one side of the body, for example. But giving, people that opportunity to see their dogs in a relaxed way and really focusing on that internal environment just means that external environment is just naturally less disruptive for these amazing animals. And we really focus on income for the dog and have what I call the no attachment to outcome, where we're not focused on outcome. We're just focused on giving that dog a rewarding experience, shaping that free work setup to meet their physical and emotional and cognitive needs, and letting nature work its magic. And it's a life-changing experience. And that's why I give away so much information on it, Ryan, because I'm so passionate about helping dogs find peace. And I think that comes from, going back to Cynthia and Erin, the desire to create peace, even in very difficult times, and have a really peaceful environment is, a huge part of how I connect with dogs. Let's help them find that sense of peace so that they can recover more quickly if something does upset or overexcite them. Stress isn't always a negative thing. Body tension isn't always a negative thing. It can come from high excitement, joy, exuberance. But then the body gets stuck in these habits, and we need to help the animal learn and experience what true relaxation and true contentment feels like. Because once the body knows what's available, it can find it again if we create the right environment for them.
I know what I want to ask you, but I don't know what I want to ask you. I don't know.
Makes sense to me, Ryan.
I don't know how to articulate it. So gratitude to you in advance for answering whatever comes out of my mouth next.
Okay, I'll give it a
go. You said there, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I'm taking myself back to watching the free work sessions that we did in Bourne, UK, October, I think, last year.
Yeah.
And you gave an example there of the spread of the toe that tells you there's uneven weight bearing. And that's what blew me away so much about it. It was, I'm learning a lot now that I didn't, that adds to and places the layers upon what I learned back then in terms of the relaxation part. Because the thing that blew me away there was the in the moment awareness of the things that I wasn't seeing. And then thinking as a professional, if I'm helping an animal, there's so much that I can do, and the owner's definitely better without me, and I'm doing a great job. But there's so much that I'm not seeing, and I can only imagine that it's true for everyone, because everyone has their knowledge and experience. They can
For
only
sure.
see what they can see. And so for me, it was just in that in those sessions, just so much enjoyment from you going, look at that thing, and I was like, didn't see that, didn't even know to look there, and look at how much information. And you said that you understand a little bit about the nervous system. And I was like, well, that's not what I took away from watching you do those sessions. I was like, here's someone who knows a lot about these things. Um, and it was exciting in so much, Sarah, as yeah, I love that there's frequent times doing this podcast show, running Animal Training Academy, traveling to conferences where and lots of people say this, so I know that the listeners of this show can relate to this, where you realize how little you know and you realize how much scope there is to expand and kind of even start again from a new learning position. But for the listeners of the show, and also before I ask that and before I say this, this episode and everything you've shared so far has been incredibly helpful and insightful, and I think the learners will take away a lot from it. But it doesn't do justice to being there and watching you work and seeing the free work in real life. But we're for people, and also you shared, was it with Cookie Dough, that you can train all of his behaviors and she'll already new skills, but there's something missing there. And I got that sense
Yeah.
as well. Like, okay, cool, I can teach new skills and I'm good at that and doing my ABCs and all of that kind of stuff, but I'm missing this because I don't know this information. I'm missing potentially important parts of the jigsaw puzzle, which there's these fleeting feelings of overwhelm. Where should the listeners of this show start to go, okay, I kind of understand free work. I probably need to dive into Sarah's content more to understand it more and set it all up. And then I've got to kind of understand like what to look for and what this, because I remember I think there was an example, Sarah, where the dogs were licking, and you're like, when the dog's licking, look at this muscle on this back leg, and you'll see it flinching. And I was like, mind blowing. Didn't even know that existed. So like, there's learning all of those things about what to look for. Because I imagine like a free work, what I'm trying to say is that a free work setup without that knowledge, where do we start to get the knowledge to turn the free work session into an opportunity for us to see what we're not seeing? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And lots of people will come join an online course. That's a really cool thing to start. And what I would say is, if you're not used to looking at animals, I was lucky because I grew up riding, and we pay attention to what movement sounds like. You're hearing for that lameness, you're hearing for that toe stuff. And so I listened to dogs' movement as well. But that was never taught in the dog world. That's why I'm so passionate about this. So I grew up seeing and feeling and hearing things, but just because of connecting with horses. If you're used to watching animals in any capacity, set up free work and see what you can see as movement slows down. It is mind blowing. When a dog stands at a station, and as a rule of thumb, as a bit of a guide, there's no set rules because we're working with each individual dog. The top of the station shouldn't be any higher than the top of the dog's front leg, because we don't want dogs to be stretching. Stretching creates tension. Stretching tells the body its limitation. And we're always working with the possibility. That's a Feldenkrais saying, don't show the body its limitation. Always remind it of its potential. So start just putting out some snuffle mats at a height where your dogs can access it. And what I'm looking for is, can that dog organize their body and have a leg at each corner, as I call it? And ideally, and it's going to vary slightly to do the conformation of the dog and also whatever genetic predisposition to a slightly challenged conformation that dog might have inherited. But for the majority of dogs, if you imagine they have paint on their pads, and if they're standing at a station licking a sensory mat or licky mat, provided the food's not caught in the squares, because that just makes dogs bite at the licky mats and can trigger frustration. Watch to see where those paws are, and if they walked away, what paw prints would you see? Would you see a paw print at each corner of a rectangle? So your dog's got the front feet parallel, the back feet parallel, and a lovely lengthened back, because that's ideally what we're looking to support, but we're not luring. We're letting nature do its amazing thing and letting the body find that position for itself. Or is the dog protecting their lumbar spine, their hips, their knees? And are the back legs together, but forward, further forward, underneath the dog's body? Are those toes in front of the knee? And if the dog then walked away, would they be leaving 4 little paw prints at the corner of a square? What we want is that rectangle, that longer frame. Can the dog even stand with 4 legs in balance? Or is there a wide stance in front and back legs really close together because, again, they're protecting maybe the lower back? Or have they always got the right hind habitually out to the side, perhaps? And then maybe we start to recognize, oh, look, there's a coat color change around that right hip. And actually, the dog, when invited to turn to the left, struggles because it can't actually lengthen the structures on the right. That's really interesting. They're only going around their free work in a clockwise way, or maybe only an anti-clockwise way. We start to see so much more detail. And that also, Ryan, helps us recognize the difference between reward-based training and rewarding education. So the two are very different. If I have a dog that I've discovered cannot, for any reason, turn to the right, let's say he can't turn to the right at all, his preference is to move anti-clockwise around my free work setup, and when licking can only flex the head to the left, the neck to the left, sorry, never flexes the neck to the right, I can then say, oh my, and this has happened, this is what the details that we see in free work. I can then say, oh my goodness, maybe when I'm out walking this dog on a line and the dog perceives a threat coming towards them, or in a field because they've never seen a donkey before, if I invite that dog to turn to the right, because I'm habitually handling dogs on my left side, it actually doesn't matter how many rewards I pair with that right-handed movement. That movement and that invitation to turn away is never going to be a rewarding experience for the dog because it's potentially painful, because I'm asking them to move in a direction that's not easy. And not only might it be uncomfortable, it's going to create more body tension. And dogs that are tense in the body and or painful can't scent food. So when we say, oh, my dog can't eat when they're out, why? Because they're tense, because maybe they're painful, because maybe we are adding pressure, even though we're trying to give them a good experience. So that, just those details, look at the feet. What are the ears doing? Where's the tail? Is the tail in balance, or is the tail off to the right or the left? That's really common, that one ear will be less mobile, the tail will be hanging off to one side. And how does the dog navigate that space? Do they go left and right, or do they have a very clear preference? And how does that then translate to how we connect with them on a line when we're furthering their education and experiences? If that is already making people go, that's too much information, and I am trying to give you 30 years of experience in a really tight time frame, and I'm so passionate about this, I 100% share way too much. So apologies if people can't keep up with the information I'm sharing. But that's the joy of recording, right? You get to play it back in the back. Go and look at your photographs that you've got of your dog who you shared your life with. Start looking at the sit. Look at the sit from puppyhood up to however old your dog might be, or photographs that you might have captured over the last few months if your dog's new, a new member of your family. Because lots of dogs with undiagnosed chronic pain will have a sloppy or slouchy sit. So they might only sit on one hip, or they might sit with their hind legs past their front legs, where they've rolled back on the pelvis, or maybe they can't sit. And maybe when they lie down, they only ever lie on their right side. And start looking at information of where does your dog choose to rest? Because quite often we'll create a bed that might actually not be so comfortable for the dog. We don't give them as much choice. And certainly we want to be mindful of any hard bed that might be forcing the dog to adopt a position that might not be so comfortable. So I go for soft beds with raised sides on maybe a couple or 2 or 3 sides, so the dog can rest their neck like a pillow. But they've also got the option to have a lower side. So we've got round beds with sides, raised beds with 3 sides to support the dog, flat beds, chairs. We've got a whole array of different stuff. And it's really interesting noting when the dogs choose what type of bed and what positions they sleep in. So I want my dogs to be able to sleep on their back, sleep on their left side, their right side, flat out, curled up. And if we don't see that massive range of sleep postures, we've got to ask why. Why is this dog unable to access a variety of sleep positions like we do? And then what you see in sleep is often what you'll see when the dogs are awake in movement. So watch your dogs dreaming. Do they go into REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep? And when they are dreaming, what parts of their body are twitching? Because when Henry came to me, it was evident he's got some damage, or maybe was born with a problem with the right side of his neck. So his right ear doesn't or didn't move as much. It's much better now as his left. And even when he was dreaming, his left ear would twitch and his right ear wouldn't. And we've had dogs with hip dysplasia whose front legs twitch, but their back legs don't, until they were on pain relief and everything relaxed. And then the back legs were twitching in the sleep as well. There's so much information. As I say, everything you could want to know about your companion is there in front of you. We've just got to start observing it. So I run an online course called Ace Dog Detective, and I'll put one on probably towards the end of the year. It's one of my favorite full courses to teach. 3 weeks online, going through photographs, people setting up free work, uploading the videos. We give feedback in a dedicated Facebook group. It's such a fun course. And it's can be, it's a life-changing course for dogs and people. And I can't guarantee what people will learn from any experience, but I can guarantee one thing. If you do the Ace Dog Detective course, or you come on a free work workshop, or you connect with some of our amazing ACE tutors who will do one-to-ones online, I guarantee you will never look at your dog in the same way again. And it's really exciting, but comes with a health warning too, because you may discover things that are uncomfortable. And guilt is an unfortunate and unavoidable part of learning, because when we learn something new, that's when we can have regret. And I look back at photographs and I think, how did I miss that? And I see things in a different way, and I still miss stuff. But like you were saying, it's exciting. It's exciting when I watch this data gathering pattern. It's exciting when we recognize the finish clues. Dogs start counter surfing. They start staring at treat pouches. That's not them saying, I want to learn more. That's often around that 17-minute mark where they default to a well-practiced behavior that requires no more thinking or processing, because they need a break from all the new experiences. And it's overwhelming. And I look back at my older photos of companions that we've had, and I just go, I'm so sorry I missed that. But as we learn more, we're going to look back and realize how far we've come, because as you said, you can't know what you don't know. You can't see what you can't see. And we have to be mindful of the fact that any animal who's blessed to share their life with a canine guardian or equine guardian or feline guardian that is open to learning is a lucky animal. And we are blessed to have these forgiving and giving souls in our life to further our knowledge through everything they have to share.
I remember before I went to your free work session, Leslie McDevitt said to me, everyone needs to do free work. And I was like, well, if Leslie says that, I'm definitely going to go. So I am excited to hopefully have time to do that with you and Ace Work in the future. That would be amazing. I know, and I'm sold.
You are welcome anytime.
I'm sold from what I've seen and what I've learned from you that what you're saying is 100% true.
I think we've overcomplicated a lot of stuff when it comes to canine education, and just stripping everything back just gives us permission to sweat the small stuff. And I say we must sweat the small stuff. And sweat is stand back, watch, engage, acknowledge, and teach. Sweat. We do need to sweat the small stuff because all that information is there. I used to do court case assessments for Section 1 and 3 of the Dangerous Dogs Act. And I'd see coat patterns and I'd feel temperature changes, and we'd get dogs reassessed by vets, really pinpointing where we could get these dogs x-rayed or whatever to save their lives in court. And there was always a reason why that bite had occurred. There was a dog who, when I was watching him, couldn't flex his neck to the left and his left ear was really rigid. And I said, and when I was assessing, I never wanted to read any of the reports. I didn't want to read anything from the police or witness reports. I didn't want to know anything about the dog. I didn't even want to talk to the guardian. I just wanted to assess the dog either at Tilly Farm if they'd come to me or in the kennels if they'd been seized, because I didn't want any voice in my head other than the voice of that dog. And I could write down pretty well what had happened because of all the little fun things I would do. I wouldn't provoke the dogs. And we can look at levels of arousal through the provision of different toys and food. You don't have to provoke them, we really don't. And it was amazing being able to find all these details and realizing why the dog had reacted when they were touched in a very specific place. And I feel very lucky as well that I had all that as a learning experience, because literally every dog could tell me the truth of their story. And then, of course, we could make sure those dogs were pain-free, that maybe their diet was changed, if they had dietary sensitivities, because that can trigger behaviors that actually look like it could be a hip issue, but actually it can be linked to discomfort in the lower back because of the dietary sensitivity. That's my experience too. So yeah, all this information is there and all this detail is there. And it's just amazing when we really do sweat the small stuff and practice looking. We need to practice. Sometimes we need to practice observing. We're such a busy species that we've forgotten the art of looking with peripheral vision. We're so busy, we're central vision focused. And it's difficult when you're looking using your central vision, because actually your peripheral vision is what is mainly designed to pick up movement. So we can actually see more detail, the more relaxed we are, and the more we use all aspects of our visual system. And free work gives you the opportunity to be relaxed and stand back and watch, or join your dog at the stations, because then we add learning layers. We can teach all sorts of skills in free work. We join the dog at their favourite station. We include cheerags, the counting game, but very modified version, because we never need to count beyond one. So we teach all sorts of life skills on the foundation of free work, and there's emerging evidence that it actually speeds up learning, improves recall. It is mind blowing. And I say this not because I came up with it, because I don't think I came up with it. Cookie Dough and Henry and dogs like Oscar and dogs like Sandy at the RSPCA that switched me on to coat changes linked with discomfort. They're all the ones that have created ACE, and Cookie Dough and Henry are the ones that have really developed ACE free work. So I promote it, not because it's my finding. It's not. I've just interpreted what these amazing dogs have been sharing for so many years. It's their work. And that's why I'm happy to share it and give it away, because it was developed by dogs for dogs, and it needs to go back to the dogs.
Yeah, and Sarah, if I could have Cookie Dough and Henry on the podcast, I would, but we have to invite you to offer that interpretation. Hey, I could keep asking questions, but I realize, I laughed internally, or maybe when you said TED Talks are intentionally 18 minutes. So we appreciate you listening to this podcast, show the listener, for the good hours that we dive into these topics. Thank you very much. We've talked about ACE Online and where people can go to Tilly Farm and some of the great learning opportunities that you provide I just wanted to do a shout out as well to an upcoming trip you have to the US of A to speak at
Yes.
the Aggression in Dogs conference. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yes, I'm doing a presentation on free work and the sensory side of the bite, helping to build a dog's sensory reference library and observations. Because in my experience, dogs that are really sensitive to the presence of unfamiliar people and unfamiliar animals are really tight in their body. And just think, discomfort restricts and comfort expands. So I'm very lucky, very honoured that Michael Shikashio has invited me to share some of that at the conference in September. And I can't wait.
Amazing. And that will be, September 26th to 28th. You can attend in person or live stream, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes for this episode, because if you can, I would highly encourage you to get along to see Sarah at that event. And just as an added bonus, you get a bunch of other amazing speakers and presentations there as well. Michael Shikashio is doing an amazing job of putting that event on. Where else can people go online, Sarah, to do some of the learning opportunities that you've mentioned?
Animal-centerededucation.com. But also look at the Tilly Farm website, tillyfarm.org.uk, because we have amazing ACE tutors, some of whom started saying, I'm not an observant person, but I love free work. Does it matter that I haven't got very good observations? And I say, if you recognize that dog's a black sight hound, that's your first observation. And all my amazing tutors are incredible with observations now, because we don't push people. We let people find their own learning style. We have the same principles with people that we do with animals. So we have amazing tutors. They also run online courses, and they're listed on the Tilly Farm website. So please, visit that as well. That's an old website, needs a lot of updating actually. But my amazing certified tutors and instructors run online courses on and off through the year as well. So if there's nothing on my platform that appeals, please check out some of the amazing offerings from the ACE teaching team.
Fantastic. And we will, of course, link to all of this in the show notes as well. Sarah, this has been so much fun. I'm so grateful that you said yes to jumping on the show with me. So thank you from myself and on behalf of everyone listening. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and hang out with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And thank you so much for listening as well. This is your host, Ryan Cartledge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. We hope today's conversation inspired you and equipped you with new tools for your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every challenge in training is an opportunity to learn and sharpen your animal training geekery. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, the path to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our supportive membership, where you will find a community of trainers just like you. Together, we're making a huge positive difference in the lives of animal and human learners worldwide. Until next time, keep honing your skills, stay awesome, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.